Miriam lived in a small, quiet town where most people knew each other's faces, even if they did not always know each other's stories. Her house sat near the end of a narrow street, with a little yard in front and a single tree that gave shade in the afternoon. The paint on the gate had faded over the years, but Miriam still kept the place clean. She swept the steps every morning and watered the plants that grew in old pots. She was an elderly woman with soft gray hair and gentle eyes. Her voice was calm and slow, the kind that made people feel safe. Life had made her strong, but age had made her body weak. Some days her knees hurt. Some nights her chest felt tight. Still, she told herself that worrying too much would only make things worse. Miriam's greatest comfort was her dog, Max. Max was a medium-sized brown dog with alert ears and a smart face. He had lived with her for years. He followed her from room to room like a loyal shadow. If Miriam sat down to rest, Max lay near her feet. If she stood by the window, Max stood beside her. He was not trained like a police dog, but his heart was steady and his senses were sharp. He could tell when Miriam was tired. He could tell when a stranger walked near the gate. On that particular morning, Miriam woke up later than usual. Sunlight had already filled the room when she opened her eyes. Her head felt heavy, and her mouth felt dry. She sat up slowly, holding the edge of the bed until the spinning feeling passed. Max watched her closely, his tail tapping the floor. He made a soft sound, like he was asking if she was okay. "I am fine," Miriam whispered, even though she was not fully sure. She moved to the kitchen and made a simple breakfast. Bread, tea, and a little fruit. She ate slowly. Max sat near the door, waiting. After breakfast, Miriam filled Max's bowl and patted his head. Outside, the town sounded normal. A motorbike passed. A neighbor called to someone across the street. A few birds chirped near the tree. Everything looked ordinary, but Miriam felt something strange inside. A worry she could not name. Then her phone rang. Miriam looked at the screen and blinked in surprise. It was her oldest child, Samir. Samir's voice was quick and flat. "We are coming today. Me, Lena, and Omar." Miriam's heart jumped. "Today? That is good. What time?" "Soon," Samir said. "Just be ready." Before she could ask more, the call ended. Miriam stood still for a moment, holding the phone. Her children rarely came together. When they did, it was usually because they needed something. Still, she tried not to think that way. A mother's hope is stubborn. It keeps finding reasons to believe. She cleaned the sitting room again. She placed fresh covers on the cushions. She washed a few cups and set them on a tray. She even took out a small box of sweets that she saved for special days. Max followed her everywhere, watching her face. "You will behave," Miriam told him, smiling a little. "No jumping." Max wagged his tail like he understood. Around noon, a car stopped outside. Miriam heard the doors shut, then voices. She hurried to the gate. Her children walked in like visitors, not like people returning home. Samir looked around with sharp eyes. Lena wore a neat dress and held her phone in her hand. Omar, the youngest, wore sunglasses even though the sunlight was not strong. Miriam's smile widened. "You came. Thank God. Come inside." Samir nodded once. Lena gave a small greeting. Omar did not speak at first. They walked in, glancing at the house like they were checking something. Max stepped forward, tail moving, ready to greet them. But Samir's face tightened. "Put the dog away," he said. Miriam's smile became smaller. "Max is gentle. He will not bother you." "I said put him away," Samir repeated. "We are here to talk." Max sensed the tension and stood still. His ears leaned forward, and he watched Samir. Lena looked at Miriam and sighed. "Mom, just do it. We do not want trouble." Miriam felt embarrassed, even though she had done nothing wrong. She held Max's collar gently. "Come, Max." Max walked with her, but he kept looking back. Maryam led him outside. She did not want to lock him inside a room because he would bark. So she decided to keep him near the yard. She reached for his chain. Before she could clip it, Omar grabbed it from her hand. "I will do it," he said, too fast. He pulled Max toward the front of the yard. There was a metal pole near the edge of the road that once held a sign. It was old and scratched. Omar wrapped the chain around it and clipped it tight. Maryam frowned. "Not so tight. He needs space." Omar did not answer. He walked back toward the house. Max tried to follow Maryam, but the chain stopped him. He gave a short bark, confused. Maryam walked back and patted his head through the chain. "Stay," she whispered. "I will be inside." Max's eyes stayed on her, worried. Inside the house, her children sat down without waiting to be invited. Samir leaned forward and spoke in a hard, businesslike voice. "We need to discuss the house." Maryam blinked. "The house?" Samir nodded. "Yes. It is old. It is too much for you. We should sell it." Maryam's stomach tightened. "Sell it? But this is my home." Lena crossed her arms. "Mom, you cannot live alone forever." "I have been living here," Maryam said softly. "I manage." Samir's tone became sharper. "You do not manage. You are weak. You forget things. We cannot keep coming here." Maryam felt heat rise to her face. She wanted to say that they did not come often anyway. She wanted to say she did not ask for much. But her voice stayed quiet because she feared making them angry. Omar finally spoke. "If we sell, we can divide the money. Then we can put you somewhere safe." "Somewhere safe," Maryam repeated, confused. "Like where?" Samir waved his hand. "There are places. Care homes. Someone will look after you." Maryam stared at them. Her mind tried to understand. A care home meant strangers. Strange rooms. Different smells. Rules. It meant leaving the kitchen where she cooked. Leaving the tree outside. Leaving the memories on the walls. Her chest felt tight again. "I do not want that," she said, voice shaking. "This house is my life." Samir's face hardened. "Mom, do not make this difficult." Maryam tried to breathe slowly, but the room felt smaller. The air felt heavier. Her hands began to tremble. Outside, Max barked once, then again. Not playful barks. Warning barks. Maryam turned her head toward the sound, and her heart beat faster. She pressed a hand to her chest and stood up, but her legs felt weak. Her vision blurred at the edges. Lena looked annoyed. "The dog is making noise." Maryam tried to walk toward the door, toward Max, toward fresh air. But the moment she took a step, the floor seemed to tilt. She swayed. Her knees gave up. And Maryam fell. Max barked louder outside, pulling against the chain, his body tense like he knew something terrible had just happened. The sound of Maryam's fall echoed softly in the room. Her body lay still on the floor, one arm bent under her, her face turned to the side. For a short moment, no one moved. Samir stood frozen, his mouth half open. Lena stared at the floor, her eyes wide. Omar took a step back as if distance could erase what had just happened. "Maryam," Lena said, her voice thin. Maryam did not answer. Outside, Max barked again, louder and sharper. He pulled hard against the chain, his paws scraping the ground. His eyes were fixed on the door. He could feel the change in the air. Something was very wrong. Inside, Samir finally moved. He knelt beside Maryam and touched her shoulder. "Mom," he said, shaking her lightly. "Get up." There was no response. Lena looked toward the door, then back at Samir. "Is she breathing?" Samir placed his hand near Maryam's face. He hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Yes. But she is not waking up." Omar rubbed his hands together. "What do we do now?" For a moment, The room was filled only with Max's barking from outside and Miriam's faint breathing. Samir stood up and walked toward the window. He looked out and saw neighbors passing at a distance. "We cannot call anyone," he said quietly. Lena turned to him in shock. "What do you mean?" Samir lowered his voice. "If we call for help, people will ask questions. They will ask why she fell. They will ask what we were saying." Lena's face tightened. "She is our mother." "I know," Samir replied, his jaw stiff. "But think. If people get involved, it will become a problem." Omar looked between them. "We did not do anything wrong." Samir looked at him. "It will not matter what we say. People will decide on their own." Max barked again, even louder now. His chain pulled tight, and he stood on his back legs, trying to reach the door. "That dog will bring attention," Lena said nervously. Samir glanced at the door. "We should leave." Lena stared at him. "Leave her like this?" "She is breathing," Samir said. "Someone will find her." Lena's hands shook. She looked down at Miriam, then away. Her voice grew quieter. "Just for a short time. Until we think." Omar nodded slowly, convincing himself. "Yes. Just until later." They moved quickly. Samir picked up his bag. Lena straightened the cushions as if that could fix something. Omar opened the door and stepped outside. Max barked wildly when he saw them. He pulled so hard that the chain dug into his neck. Omar avoided his eyes and walked past him. Samir followed, then Lena. None of them stopped. The car started and drove away. The street became quiet again. Inside the house, Miriam lay still on the floor. The sunlight moved slowly across the room as time passed. Her breathing was shallow. Her body was cold against the tiles. Outside, Max continued to bark. His voice grew rough, but he did not stop. He pulled and twisted, testing the chain again and again. When barking did not work, he changed his sound. A deep, sharp call. Then a long cry. A woman named Nita lived 2 houses away. She was hanging clothes when she heard the dog. At first, she ignored it. Dogs bark all the time, she thought. But this barking was different. It did not stop. It carried fear. Nita stepped closer to the gate and looked down the street. She saw Max tied to the pole, his body tense, his eyes wild. She frowned. "Why is Miriam's dog tied like that?" she said to herself. She walked closer. Max saw her and barked toward the house, then looked back at Nita, then toward the door again. His movements were clear, urgent. Nita felt a chill. She called out, "Miriam!" No answer. She walked up the steps and noticed the door was open. That was not like Miriam. She pushed it gently and looked inside. "Miriam!" she called again. Her eyes adjusted to the light, and then she saw the body on the floor. Nita gasped. She rushed inside and knelt beside Miriam. She touched her arm and felt how cold it was. "Oh no," Nita whispered. She ran outside and shouted for help. "Someone come quickly." Max barked louder, as if agreeing. A man named Rafi was riding his bicycle nearby, delivering small packages. He heard the shouting and stopped. He saw Nita waving her arms. "What happened?" Rafi asked as he ran over. "Miriam is on the floor," Nita said. "She is not waking up." Rafi did not hesitate. He ran inside and looked at Miriam. He checked her breathing the way he had learned in school. "She is alive," he said firmly. "We need help now." Rafi pulled out his phone and called emergency services. He spoke clearly and calmly, giving the address. While he talked, Nita covered Miriam with a shawl. Outside, Max barked and pulled again. Rafi noticed him and went out. He saw the chain tight around the pole. "This dog is trying to tell us something," Rafi said. He knelt and unclipped the chain. Max ran straight into the house, sliding on the floor until he reached Miriam. He lay beside her head and made a low sound, soft and worried. He did not leave her side. Minutes felt long. Nida held Miriam's hand. Rafi watched the door. When the ambulance arrived, the sound broke the silence. 2 workers rushed in with equipment. They spoke quickly, checking Miriam's pulse and breathing. "She is weak," one of them said. "But she has a chance." They lifted Miriam onto the stretcher carefully. Max tried to follow, staying close. "He wants to come," Rafi said. One of the workers nodded. "Let him. He is calm." Max stayed beside Miriam as they moved her into the ambulance. As the doors closed and the vehicle drove away, Nida and Rafi stood quietly. The house behind them looked empty and sad. Neither of them knew where Miriam's children were. But both of them knew one thing. If Max had not barked, no one would have come in time. The ambulance moved through the quiet streets with steady speed. Inside, Miriam lay on the stretcher, her face pale but calm. A soft oxygen mask covered her nose. One worker checked her pulse again while the other watched the monitor. Max sat on the floor near her head, his body still, his eyes never leaving her face. Every time the ambulance slowed or turned, Max shifted slightly, making sure he stayed close. When Miriam's hand moved just a little, Max lifted his head and let out a soft sound. It was not loud. It was full of hope. At the hospital, bright lights filled the hallway. The workers moved fast, guiding the stretcher through wide doors. Doctors and nurses were waiting. They spoke in clear, firm voices and asked quick questions. "Elderly woman. Found unconscious at home," one worker said. "Breathing was weak. Pulse low." The doctors nodded and took over. Miriam was moved into a clean room. Machines were connected. A nurse checked her eyes and spoke her name gently. "Miriam, can you hear me?" Miriam did not answer, but her breathing became steadier. Max tried to follow her into the room, but a nurse held her hand up. "He can wait outside," she said kindly. Max sat near the door, alert and patient. He did not bark. He did not lie down. He waited. Hours passed slowly. The hallway grew quieter as night came. A clock ticked on the wall. Max stayed in the same spot, his ears lifting every time footsteps came close. Nida and Rafi arrived together. They had followed the ambulance in a neighbor's car. Nida looked tired, her face tight with worry. Rafi spoke to the nurse at the desk and explained what had happened. "She was alone," Rafi said. "Her children were there earlier, but they left." The nurse frowned slightly and wrote something down. "The doctor will speak with you soon." Inside the room, Miriam's body responded slowly to treatment. Her color improved a little. Her breathing became deeper. A doctor named Anwar watched the monitor and nodded. "She is stable now," he said to the nurse. "She will need rest and care, but she is not in danger at this moment." When Miriam finally opened her eyes, it was very slowly. The ceiling above her looked strange and bright. She tried to move her head, but it felt heavy. "Easy," a nurse said softly. "You are safe." Miriam blinked again. Her lips moved. "Max," she whispered. The nurse smiled. "Your dog is right outside." Miriam closed her eyes again, a small tear slipping down her cheek. Later, the nurse opened the door and allowed Max to come in. The moment Max saw Miriam awake, his tail moved gently. He stepped closer and placed his head near her hand. Miriam lifted her fingers and touched his fur. "You stayed," she whispered. Max made a soft sound and stayed still, careful not to disturb her. Dr. Anwar spoke to Miriam in a calm voice. He explained that her body had become weak from stress and exhaustion. He asked if she lived alone. Miriam nodded. "Do you have family nearby?" he asked. Miriam hesitated. Her eyes shifted away. "Yes," she said quietly. "But they are busy." The doctor did not push further. He simply nodded and told her she would need to stay at the hospital for a few days. Outside the room, Rafi and Nida waited. Dr. Anwar came out and spoke with them. She will recover, he said. But she should not be alone anymore. Nida sighed in relief. Thank God. Rafi nodded. What about her family? Dr. Anwar's expression grew serious. We will ask them to come. We need to understand the situation. Later that night, Samir received a call from the hospital. He answered with a tired voice. Your mother is at the hospital, the nurse said. She was found unconscious. There was silence on the line. Is she alive? Samir asked. Yes, the nurse replied. She is stable. You should come. Samir said he would think about it and ended the call. He did not tell Lena or Omar right away. He sat alone, staring at the wall, his thoughts heavy. The next morning, Mariam felt a little stronger. She could sit up with help. She drank warm water and ate a small meal. Max lay near her bed, watching every movement. A social worker named Hina came to speak with her. She asked gentle questions about Mariam's life, her home, and her children. Mariam answered slowly. They came to talk about the house, Mariam said. I felt dizzy. Then I do not remember. Hina listened carefully and took notes. Do you feel safe returning home alone? Mariam looked at Max, then at the window. She shook her head. No. Hina nodded. We will help you find a safe solution. Later that day, Samir arrived at the hospital alone. He stood at the door, unsure. When he saw Mariam awake, his face showed surprise, then discomfort. You are awake, he said. Mariam looked at him calmly. Yes. There was a long pause. Samir glanced at Max and then away. I heard you fell. Mariam nodded. I did. He waited for her to say more. She did not. The silence felt heavy. Samir shifted his weight. The doctor says you need care. Yes, Mariam replied. I do. Samir opened his mouth, then closed it again. For the first time, he seemed unsure of what to say. Outside the room, Hina watched quietly. She had heard enough to know this was not just about a fall. It was about choices. As Samir left the room, Max followed him with his eyes until the door closed. Mariam rested her head back on the pillow. She felt tired, but something inside her felt clearer than before. She understood now that love was not always shown by words or blood. Sometimes, love stayed when everyone else left. And Max was still there. The next few days passed slowly for Mariam. Each morning, sunlight came through the hospital window and rested on the white walls. Nurses came in and out, checking her condition, bringing medicine, and speaking to her in gentle voices. Mariam followed their instructions carefully. She wanted to recover, not just for herself, but for Max. Max stayed close at all times. When Mariam slept, he lay near the bed. When she woke up, he lifted his head and watched her face. The nurses noticed how calm Mariam became whenever Max was near. They allowed him to stay longer than usual. Rafi visited every evening after finishing his deliveries. He brought fresh fruit and asked how she was feeling. Nida came too, sometimes with warm soup, sometimes just to sit quietly. Their presence made Mariam feel less alone. One afternoon, the social worker Hina returned with a folder in her hands. She pulled a chair closer to Mariam's bed and spoke clearly. Mariam, we need to talk about what happens after you leave the hospital, she said. Mariam nodded. I know. You are not strong enough to live alone right now, Hina continued. There are a few options. One is a care home nearby. It is calm and clean, and pets are allowed. Mariam looked down at Max. He raised his head, sensing her attention. A place where Max can stay? Mariam asked. Yes, Hina replied. He can stay with you. Mariam felt relief move through her chest. Then that is good. Hina smiled softly. We will arrange it. That same day, Samir returned to the hospital. This time, Lena came with him. They stood near the bed, looking uncomfortable. Miriam greeted them with a calm nod. "We spoke to the doctor," Lena said. "He says you should not go back to the house." Miriam answered gently. "I agree." Samir cleared his throat. "We can help with costs." Hina, who was standing nearby, stepped forward. "Support is appreciated," she said. "But decisions about Miriam's living arrangements will be made with her agreement." Samir nodded quickly. "Of course." Miriam watched them quietly. She did not argue. She did not beg. Something had changed inside her. She no longer felt afraid of silence. The next day, Miriam was discharged from the hospital. A small van arrived to take her to the care home. Nida helped pack her few belongings. Rafi carried the bag. Max walked beside Miriam as she moved slowly toward the exit. The care home was near a park with tall trees and walking paths. The building was not large, but it was bright and clean. Staff members welcomed Miriam warmly. They showed her a small room with a window facing the garden. "This will be your room," a woman named Sana said. "Max can stay with you." Miriam placed her bag near the bed and sat down. Max explored the room, sniffing every corner. Then he returned and lay down near her feet. That evening, Miriam sat in the garden with other residents. Some talked quietly. Some watched birds. Miriam listened more than she spoke. She felt strange being in a new place, but she did not feel unsafe. Days turned into weeks. Miriam grew stronger. She joined short walks in the park. Max walked beside her, his pace slow and steady. Staff members smiled whenever they saw them together. One afternoon, Hina visited again. She spoke with Miriam privately. "There will be a formal review of what happened," Hina said. "Your children will be asked questions." Miriam took a deep breath. "I understand. Do you want to speak?" Hina asked. Miriam thought for a moment. "Yes," she said. "I will speak the truth." When the meeting day came, it was calm but serious. Officials listened as Miriam explained what happened in her own words. She spoke slowly, clearly, without anger. Rafi and Nida also shared what they saw that day. Samir and Lena were present. They avoided Miriam's eyes. The decision was firm. Miriam's children were held responsible for neglect. They were instructed to provide regular support and were restricted from making decisions about her home without permission. The old house was secured under community care. It would not be sold without Miriam's approval. When the meeting ended, Miriam felt tired but lighter. She had spoken without fear. Back at the care home, Miriam sat on her bed and rested. Max jumped up beside her and placed his head on her lap. "You did well," she whispered. Outside the window, the park was quiet. Leaves moved gently in the wind. Children laughed in the distance. Miriam closed her eyes and smiled. For the first time in a long while, she felt truly protected. Life at the care home slowly became normal for Miriam. Each morning, she woke up to soft light coming through the window. Birds sang outside, and the air smelled fresh from the nearby park. Max was always the first to wake. He stood up, stretched, and looked at Miriam until she opened her eyes. She smiled every time. "Good morning," she said quietly. After breakfast, Miriam walked with Max along the garden path. Her steps were slow but steady. The staff encouraged her, and she felt proud of every small improvement. Max stayed close, never pulling ahead, never falling behind. He matched her pace as if he understood her limits. Other residents noticed them. Some smiled. Some asked to pet Max. He accepted gentle hands and calm voices. Soon, everyone knew Miriam as the woman with the loyal dog. Rafi continued to visit once or twice a week. He brought news from the town and asked about her health. Nida came too, sometimes bringing homemade food, sometimes just sitting beside Miriam on a bench. Their kindness reminded Miriam that family does not always come from blood. One afternoon, Miriam received a letter from Samir. She held it for a long time before opening it. The words inside were careful and short. He wrote that he was sorry and that he would respect the rules set by the officials. He promised support and said he hoped she was well. Miriam folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope. She did not feel angry. She did not feel relieved either. She felt calm. She understood that apologies do not erase actions, but they can be a beginning. She chose not to reply that day. Weeks passed, and Miriam grew stronger. She began helping in small ways at the care home. She watered plants. She helped another resident fold laundry. She shared stories with those who wanted to listen. Her voice carried warmth, and her words carried experience. Max became a familiar sight in the park. Children recognized him and waved. He stayed gentle and alert, always aware of Miriam's position. Staff members said he was like a quiet guardian. One morning, Hina visited again. She sat with Miriam in the garden and smiled. "You have adjusted well," Hina said. Miriam nodded. "I feel at peace here." "There is one more thing," Hina added. "The house in the town is still yours. You can visit it any time if you wish." Miriam looked toward the trees. "Maybe one day," she said. "Not yet." That afternoon, Miriam and Max sat near the edge of the park. The sun was warm but gentle. Max lay at her feet, his eyes half closed. Miriam thought about the day she fell. She remembered the fear, the confusion, and the pain. She also remembered the barking, the pulling, the warning that brought help. She placed her hand on Max's head. "You saved me," she whispered. Max lifted his head and looked at her. He did not understand words, but he understood her voice. One evening, the care home held a small gathering in the garden. Lights were hung between trees. Residents sat together, sharing simple food and quiet laughter. Miriam wore a clean shawl and felt part of something again. Rafi and Nida were invited. They stood nearby, watching Miriam smile as she listened to a story. "You did a good thing," Nida said softly to Rafi. Rafi shook his head. "The dog did." Across the garden, Max sat proudly beside Miriam, calm and steady. As the night grew cooler, Miriam looked up at the lights above. She felt grateful. Not because life had been easy, but because she had been given another chance. She had learned something important. Being a parent does not guarantee care. Being old does not mean being invisible. And loyalty can come from unexpected places. When the gathering ended, Miriam walked back to her room with Max. She sat on the bed and removed her shoes carefully. Max curled up beside her. Before turning off the light, Miriam looked around the room. It was small, but it was safe. It was quiet, but it was warm. She no longer felt alone. Outside, the park rested under the night sky. Inside, Miriam closed her eyes. Her life had changed, but it had not ended. It had simply found a new path. And on that path, Max walked beside her.